Things are always changing. We've said it a million times. There's always change and things are always updating. But the one thing that isn't going to change here at the Human Resources is that I'm always going to bring you back the experts. And for those of you who've been following us for the past 8 years,
That's
almost 9
That's
years,
right.
you're going to recognize Karl Ulrich.
Hi, everybody. I'm back.
But you're still with Sebaly Shillito Dyer.
I am, in fact. Yes. Yes, indeed.
And I called Karl the other day. Maybe I texted you. What did I do? Email you?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to get a hold of you now.
Yeah. Well,
Are you getting too popular?
I think so. Yeah. That's. I'm sure that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, just don't get too expensive.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid that ship has sailed, but I do my best. Well, it's great to be back. This is great. We haven't done this in a while, so.
No, but again, you got to make room for us little people.
Oh, please.
I've got big topics, but it's the little people.
It's the topics that are big. That's the way to look at it. Yes, indeed.
I reached out to Karl because we've got some updates on recordings within the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted Karl to kind of walk us through, what does this mean to an employer? Because, I'll tell you what, I just came this morning from an investigation, and it's a harassment case on a trans employee.
Yeah.
And the conversation is going very, very well. I'm taking my notes. And I said, well, I think this is about all I can, all I need for right now. And they looked at me and I said, is there anything more that you would like to add? They go, well, I guess I better tell you. And the phone had been sitting there the whole time.
Oh, no.
And I said, so, yes. And he goes, well, I do have some recordings.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't flinch at that.
Mm-hmm.
I said, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, you do have a phone and a camera's on the phone. And they said, yeah, I went ahead and recorded some of those conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And I recorded some of those things that they've been doing to me. Mm-hmm. And all I wanted to say was, well, of course you did.
Of course you did, yeah.
And how many other employees in the workplace are recording? Employers cannot assume that they're not doing that.
No. And in fact, rarely do you get asked, right? If you're an HR person.
That's exactly.
Usually it just happens. You find out after the fact. And if you're an employee who is in the middle of a sexual harassment investigation, has made a complaint and is trying to gather information, you're probably not going to tell anybody when you're recording. And you can kind of understand why someone would want to gather information that way. It's an awfully difficult case if it's just one person's word against somebody else.
Hate it.
But you got the recording. This is what happened. Here it is.
Shebang.
Right. Exactly.
It's really nice when we have the cameras in the workplace, but employees are smart. They know how to dodge that.
Oh, yeah.
What they don't dodge is that camera watching from the corner,
right,
out of their peripheral. So tell us, what has changed? What's the update?
Well, the update is there's been a new administrative law judge decision on the issue with the National Labor Relations Board on the issue of no recording policies in the workplace. And it's an interesting decision because it actually finds in favor of the employer in this case. Employer, United Parcel Service, had a no recordings in the workplace policy. And they said, partly because we don't want to interfere with people's free exchange of information. We don't want to chill open communication between people. We don't want to put our proprietary and trade secret information. They had a lot of reasons for doing that, all of which was in the policy.
Okay.
But it got challenged as an unfair labor practice under the Labor Board's procedures. And it went to an administrative law judge. Now, I should back up a second and say that, this has been a pendulum swing, this issue of, what can and cannot be recorded in the workplace. And the test of whether or not something is permissible really goes to what's called Section 7 of the National Labor Relations Act. You've heard about that before, right?
I think the entire audience has heard me talk about that.
Yeah. And so basically it guarantees the right to organize. It guarantees employees the right to act in a concerted fashion and to work together to address terms and conditions of employment. That's it in a nutshell. And when conduct by the employer undermines that ability to work together as employees to affect the terms and conditions of employment, it can be an unfair labor practice. And so, what the labor board has done over time is it's sort of interpreted that Section 7 rule to say that, there are some corporate policies relating to employees that violate that standard, that are so restrictive that it prevents employees from engaging in that necessary concerted activity. And one of the ways that that issue has been faced is in the context of no recording policies. Can an employer prohibit employees from recording things without permission or recording things at all, or to what extent and in what areas of the plant can they do that? So that's been an issue that's been really hotly debated back and forth at the labor board for years. Recently, we received this decision that came down actually in January of this year, which was a interesting decision because it kind of goes the opposite way that the board's decisions have gone in the past, at least for a few years. The other thing I should tell you is that the standard for determining whether something violates Section 7 has changed.
Okay.
Now, that changed in 2023. That standard is still in place, but the gist of it is that an employer action violates Section 7 if it reasonably has a reasonable tendency to chill Section 7 concerted activity. Chill Section 7 to reasonable tendency. Now, what does that mean? Nobody knows, right? Right? Nobody really knows. And so it's up to the board to decide that. It's up to the administrative law judges to decide that. But what we found in this particular case was the ALJ went in the direction of protecting the employer's right to prohibit. And that's not been the case typically up to this point. So that was a little bit of a shift. Now, the other thing I'll tell you about the labor board right now is that it's in chaos, right? We have 5 seats on the board, only 3 are filled, and only 1 was filled really up until December of last year. So we didn't have a functioning labor board for quite a while.
Yeah.
We do now. It's still not fully funded, but they fully filled. But they now have a quorum, so they can make decisions. The ALJ's decision isn't affected by the quorum question, but we are getting new pronouncements out of the labor board, and that's and we're going to see more of this, I think, as time goes on. So the question really is, if you're an employer, what do you do? Can you prohibit recordings or can't you?
That's exactly right. So for those who have, and there's a lot that put that in their handbook,
Mhm.
what's your advice?
Well, the way I would continue to approach this issue is I would be very careful of blanket rules
Okay.
across the board, generic blanket rules, no recordings ever.
Okay.
I would make sure that your policy about no recording is tied or tethered to some clear business reason. So, for example, you may want to make sure that people are allowed to record in private conversations in the lunchroom, for example, or that they may be allowed to record on their own time at the facility, restricting recording during work hours and during in work areas might be a more limited approach that would withstand scrutiny. That's one approach to think about. The other areas that you want to tether it to are areas related to protection of trade secrets and proprietary information. Companies, and this applies almost more so with video recording than it does with audio recording, although you have seen both, where you can prohibit employees in certain circumstances from making recordings if it places a company's research and development secrets.
And that makes sense.
And makes perfect sense, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
that
Right?
makes sense.
Because that's not really about terms and conditions of employment as much as it is about potentially threatening the company's investment in its own information and trade secrets. So you have to weigh those competing interests. tether it to a legitimate business. Why are you adopting a policy? Make sure you understand the true purposes of the policy. The other thing I would do is put that in the policy itself. Make make it clear and explicit in the policy that you're drafting that we're doing it for these reasons.
Oh, I love the why.
The why. Why.
Share the why.
And the other interesting thing too is that the ALJ said, "Hey, it doesn't really matter if you have a Section 7 disclaimer. I don't consider that all that important." Yes, that's true. The ALJ didn't consider that dispositive. They didn't have one in the case we're talking about here in that policy. But if you have a disclaimer in the language of the policy, something to the effect of, this policy is not intended to prevent people from employees from engaging in legitimate Section 7
Mhm.
exercise of Section 7 rights. And you can talk a little bit about what that means, right?
Yeah.
But if you have that disclaimer in there, and again, the purpose of the policy becomes a little clearer to the employees. It becomes less of um, a question to them. They're not as potentially as quote unquote chilled in their exercise Section 7 rights if the policy is clear about the purpose and the exclusions. So those are some ideas I think to think about.
I have talked to employers who want that hidden.
Mhm.
When I'm sharing with them the importance of including it, it's like, oh, we don't want them to know that.
Well, I get it, right? I mean, I kinda understand why where they're coming from because they're worried that, well, we're gonna give them the idea that perhaps they can go out and organize or that they can talk to each other or whatever, you know? It's it it's it kind of runs along the same lines as that very famous policy that a lot of employers have that says you can't talk to your coworkers about compensation and benefits.
That's it. That's it.
Which
Yes.
is a per se violation potentially of Section 7.
Yes.
So again, I think you're gonna find I would say most employees are a lot more sophisticated than many employers give them credit for. They're probably gonna know that anyway, you know?
Yeah.
And there's an internet, people look up their rights, and they should do that. That's what it's there for. So, I think hiding the ball isn't a very good strategy, typically, in my world.
Yeah. But so they are permitted, if there's no policy,
Mhm.
to go ahead and record in the workplace.
As long as the recording, yes. Again, company doesn't regulate it. Absolutely, there's nothing to prevent them from doing that.
Mhm.
There's no regulation against it. Now, I will give you a caveat to that. We've all heard of the old uh, a one party, two party regulatory
Yes.
provisions about eavesdropping and wiretapping and all that stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, right. So a lot of states will say as long as one party to a conversation is aware of the recording, it's legal. There are some states that say both parties or all parties to a conversation have to consent to a recording for it to be legal. That's the minority view. The majority view is most states allow it. If one party, in this case the recording employee,
Yes.
is aware of the recording, it's legal whether the other side's aware of it or not. And Ohio happens to be one of those states. So person is recording the conversation, is involved in the conversation, it's a legal recording from the state perspective.
Okay.
Now, if I'm recording standing around a corner listening to two employees talk, and I'm recording their conversation, but I'm not actively involved in that conversation, that's still a violation of the law
Okay.
because I'm not party to that. I'm not a party to the conversation. I'm doing it. I'm eavesdropping.
Yeah.
So that's the distinction. But those are some issues to think about. And in the absence of a policy, those are the rules that typically apply.
And that and with again, in the absence of a policy, whatever they record can go to social media.
Oh yeah, yeah. Um, well, absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, and you talked about an investigation. You're doing a harassment investigation. Think about the employee's perspective. You've had a complaint. You've made a complaint about sexual harassment, let's say, and the manager or the person who engaged in the conduct is pushing back, and the investigating HR person doesn't know. It's your word against that person's word. How are you going to prove it? The temptation, legitimate from my perspective, is to want to try to gather up enough evidence to support your contention that you've been a victim of sexual harassment. That, by the way, is a classic example of a protected Section 7
Yes.
activity, right?
Yes.
I am gathering information for purposes of protecting my rights under federal law and to protect the rights of other employees to be refrain from being victim of sexual harassment. Those are Section 7 protected activities. And so in many cases, if I do a recording in that context, that might be protected under Section 7. So it's a really interesting area, but it is not the easiest necessarily to track, and it does change from one administration to the next as as
So
the
does
board
everything
changes, right?
else.
As the board makeup changes, you're going to see different approaches,
Yes.
and I think we'll probably see a swing back to more pro-employer uh, 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 pronouncements going forward from the labor board. We haven't seen it yet, but now that there's a quorum again, I think we may begin to see some pullback a little bit of the Biden era approaches on a few items.
Well, and we're on a roll, so I want to touch on one more thing. Define confidential and
Mm,
proprietary, because a lot of people will claim the most broadest definition on that.
mhm.
And I've always used and focused on non-public. Expound on that for me.
Yeah, that's a great question. So confidential and proprietary typically means, from a trade secret perspective, typically means information that the company maintains that is not public and which gives them a competitive advantage in the industry by virtue of the fact that it is not public. The secret recipe for Coca-Cola,
Mhm.
classic example of a trade secret. You let that out, people make Coca-Cola, and their whole business model is undermined, right? Um, but there are a lot of things like that, particularly in manufacturing, where you have specifications, you have
Yes.
designs, you have plans, you have things that other companies, your competitors, are not aware of, and this gives because you've got this new idea and you're building out this new idea, which you intend to bring to market, you wanna keep that secret. You wanna keep those plans confidential until such time as you can begin to, recoup your investment, and that's the typical idea. Now, there are other things too, private employee information or customer information, uh, which are private or personal in nature, and they may be confidential for that reason. So those are the kinds of things we typically see in that realm.
Yeah, and many times we either see company cameras in those areas for security purposes,
Mhm.
but that's exactly what it's used for.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think video cameras for security purposes very common. Safety, right?
Yes.
Safety is another reason why oftentimes there's video surveillance within the workplace, not geared to particular conversations necessarily, uh, but the video cameras are monitoring what happens. Um, we even see companies that put cameras on forklifts as
Oh, sure.
right, fairly common now. And again, not so much to monitor whether the person's working when they say they're supposed to be working, but to make sure that the forklift is continually operated in a safe manner, that it is driven within certain acceptable speed, the usual thing. So it's a safety related issue for the most part, and that's a very common use of video.
We've seen it in trucking companies.
Sure,
That's just become a part of that industry.
right.
This is wonderful. I I knew you would know exactly how to take this.
Thank you very much. Well, it's
No,
fun.
this has been wonderful. If you have any questions and you would love to talk to Carl about this, please reach out to him at Sebaly Shillito Dyer. You can reach her on LinkedIn.
Yep, I'm there.
Yeah. Or give me a buzz and I'll be more than happy to send you his email. He just got a new office, so we're applauding him for that.
Thank you.
And he knows he has an open invitation coming back anytime he wants.
I appreciate that. It's great to be here.
Thank you for you coming and listening or watching the show as well. We love having you here at the Human Resource.